Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's Matthew back with another episode of Watty's channel. Once again, guys, we are returning to the AWA Remco tournament. As you saw in the first video, we are still doing random drawings with each of these matchups. But compared to previous tournaments, I'm choosing the members at random, writing down the tournament, the battles for each of the guys, and I'm going to relay that information to you guys. So it's not going to be me randomly selecting the names out of a hat on screen like I had previously. So that is going to save us a little bit of time. That way, when I start the video, I'm already have the guys already lined up and ready to go. So, based on who I've selected for this video, the random matches are Jim Duggan is going to square off against Shark Boy. Original Baron Von Raschke is going to square off against the Ultimate Warrior with Shirt. Jim Brunzell, original, is going to square off against Buff Bagwell. Original Terry Gordy is going to square off against Razor Ramon. And finally, original Buddy Roberts is going to square off against Macho Man with Shirt. Alright, so based on those names, with the exception of I think maybe one character, these are all AWA Remco era, characters, so they fit in beautifully again with the rest of the roster. So the first matchup we did mention was going to feature Hacksaw Jim Duggan as he squares off against Shark Boy. So one of the first things you'll notice with the Jim Duggan figure, with the black trunks and white knee pads and boots, very reminiscent to that of the 1988 Series 5 LJN figures. Just a beautiful look at the face. That is absolutely remarkable. That is a very, very young Jim Duggan right there. Now, this Jim Duggan is actually better suited for the 1980s AWA Rat Pack, which featured, of course, members such as Ted DiBiase. It featured Matt Bourne, and of course, filling off that three-man tag team was Jim Duggan himself. Never like a really crazy, over-the-top wrestler in terms of championship belts. I don't think he was ever a heavyweight champion in WWF. I think he went to WCW and found a belt in a trash can, and that way it was his only time he was ever awarded heavyweight championship. Again, I kind of saw clips of that, so I wasn't actually watching it at the time, so I don't know if that's exactly how it happened. Through other clips, I also saw him kind of square off against Stunning Steve Austin in WCW, and he defeated him in 2 seconds to become champion. If that was legitimate, again, I didn't watch WCW like that, so I don't know. Jim Duggan is Jim Duggan's kind of like your $1 Million Man. He's kind of like your Terry Funk and your Mick Foley characters. An absolute grappler in every sense of the term. And I've talked about it in the sense of, because WWF was more centered towards kids or trying to relate a lot to kids, they really had to dial down the sort of action that you'd feature in that promotion. But when you go to ECW or these little subgroup subgroup areas that had full on brawls, I'm talking about bashing light bulbs, the big long light bulbs over somebody's back, or throwing them off the top of a steel cage onto a table type of deal. That was Jim Duggan. So you see him much more later on in life, in the late 80s, early 90s, into I guess early 2000s. That is not the Jim Duggan you're accustomed to. The Bushwhackers would be another nice group to add to that list. A much more dialed down tag team, right? And so you see Jim Duggan. You've got this amazing figure who is AWA, 1980s, relevant. So he would fit beautifully in with the rest of your AWA Remco figures from that time period between 84 and 86 when the figures were made. Now, I bought this figure because I was absolutely crazy about it. I thought the paint scheme and the head sculpt was an incredible addition. I really don't know. I know little to nothing about Shark Boy. When I acquired this figure, I did a little bit of research to kind of learn about a little bit about him. Tongue tied. I don't remember who portrayed the character. I think he was like a AEW wrestler or something. I don't think he was WCW. I could be wrong about that, but I think he was like an AEW strictly wrestler. I don't think he was anybody that was like super out there as far as, you know, moving to like different promotions and becoming like a mega superstar. I could have done some more research about this, but again, this tournament, as I said before, I'm not trying to do a lot of back history with each individual character because I don't want these to be an hour-long videos. And if I were to talk about each individual, you know, it would basically take me that long. So, based on the color scheme, the paint job, and all that, you would think that this would be an absolute wash and Shark Boy would move on to the next round. But again, I absolutely love the Jim Duggan figure. I love that they kept up with the LJN color scheme for this figure. The head sculpt is amazing. This is a type of scenario where you really appreciate the design of both figures. So how do you make your selection? I think your personal history has to come into play. I just know a lot about Jim Duggan. Absolutely love him as a wrestler, and I think most people around the world would agree. You know, he is among, you know, most people's favorites. And I just don't know anything about this guy. I would love to see Shark Boy move on to like a round 2, round 3, just so I can get some more opportunities to talk about him and kind of give some more history of the character. But when it's a one-on-one match with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, I have to pass on Shark Boy for this matchup. It would have been really awesome to have the actual 2x4, but that's okay. Hacksaw Jim Duggan does move on to round 2, and I think that is an important first winner here in the second video. Next up, we had the Warrior and Baron von Raschke. So, Dingo Warrior was part of the AWA. Again, he is, you know, era relevant. This is just an absolutely amazing overall color scheme of the Ultimate Warrior. The shirt is removable, of course. See if there's anything special underneath. I don't think so. But you look at the color scheme throughout. Even the boots. I mean, you kind of have to like create these little tassels and stuff that you have on the bottom of the boots that he's infamous for wearing. The head sculpt, the paint scheme on the face is probably one of the best looking figures I have as far as Remco goes. And you look at this really closely, like really, really up close and personal, you can actually see Jim Hellwig's face underneath the face paint. So that is a perfect Ultimate Warrior head sculpt. And if you're wanting to wrestle your Remco figures, I mean, this is an absolute elite figure that would get so much darn play. I don't care if you're a kid or if you're a full-grown adult playing with toys. This would be an absolute amazing addition for any collection. Sadly, he is going against Baron von Raschke. And Von Raschke is a really solid figure. You know, he's got like these little clutch that he does, little claw and everything. So the hand positioning makes sense for this particular figure. Baron von Raschke was about 50-something years old at the time of these figures' release. And he comes with one of the top accessories of the original AWA Remco line. Is any of that enough to defeat the Ultimate Warrior for this particular matchup? He has a lot of great attributes. I'm trying to think if he was one of those guys, and I've talked about it before. I may provide a lot of information when I do my actual review videos, and then later on when I go back and start talking about them again, everything I've learned or everything I've known in the past kind of like it's just you know flies right out of my mind. And what did I say was Kelly Bundy syndrome. For those who might be too young to understand, so basically when Married with Children aired, there was an episode where Kelly Bundy was on a game show, and so Bud and man, I forget Ed O'Neill's character. How do I forget the main character? I'm just gonna call him Bundy because man, I can't remember. That's embarrassing. And the second I end up this video, I'm gonna remember his name. Al. Al Bundy. How do I forget? I gotta slap myself. Al Bundy. Can't remember his name. Anyways, back to... So Al and Bud were basically filling Kelly's mind with all this information about sports and everything. And at one point, her mind is at capacity. So when she learns something new, a previous fact she once knew basically dissipates. And that's how I kind of feel like my mind is so full that, whenever I take in new information, I forget older information I once knew. Therefore, Kelly Bundy syndrome. I'm never going to live down that whole Al thing. I keep talking because I don't want to make a selection. But I'm going to have to eventually. I just don't know anything about Baron von Raschke, and let's be honest, you could potentially be looking at here in the second video the AWA Remco champion. It's very well possible. I absolutely love the Ultimate Warrior, and his Dingo Warrior character right here is absolutely amazing. Facial paint is fantastic. Your attributes, your accessory. Why not? Why couldn't this be a winner? There's probably maybe a half a dozen or so that I feel like could really give him a run for his money. But nonetheless, Ultimate Warrior will move on to round 2. Alright, so the next matchup is going to feature Buff Bagwell and Jim Brunzell. I think this is a relatively easy decision all around. But before I get to it, Jim Brunzell. Obviously, Jump and Jim Brunzell, along with B. Brian Blair, formed the Killer Bees in the 80s. He was part of a tag team right there with Eric Gagne. And just how do I say this? So, Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell's characters in the High Flyers. When I did my favorite tag team tournament, the High Flyer tag team, I can't remember where they finished. I think they finished in the semifinals. So, for Remco figures that I grew up not even coveting, to find Remco's in the last 4 was absolutely remarkable. So you guys already know how much of an affection I have for the Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell action figures from the original Remco line. He's got the tie-dye trunks, which are absolutely amazing, and of course the accessory. Just like pretty much all of your Remcos come with accessories, so that will always, in my opinion, really be a highlight of this figure. And he's a character along with, like I said, B. Brian Blair. I may not have known the names as a kid, but I was always familiar with the Killer Bees tag team. Buff Bagwell from WCW, and he probably... Well, this one ain't the best quality. The one thing I would probably recommend to Russ when he makes these figures is, try your best to choose the best figures. I mean, I'm obviously going to leave him, positive remarks every time, but something like that, nah, that's not a quality figure. But overall, it's a good likeness of the Buff Bagwell character, and New World Order on the trunks. Again, another character I really don't know anything about. I know he was a WCW guy. I think he may have been part of WWE at some point, but there's just not enough information for me to go around to even legitimately consider this guy to move on to round 2. If he weren't going against Jim Brunzell, could he have potentially been in round 2? Of course. I think any of these figures, depending on who they went against, had the legitimate opportunity to move on to round 2. I really don't think there's any bad Remco original figures. And, of course, with the customs, I wouldn't buy the customs if I didn't like them. So, any one of these new figures could have gone 2, 3, 4 rounds. But it's just all, you're based on where they're coming up or who they're going up against. The random drawing really is going to affect a lot of these really awesome figures. Buff Bagwell, even with the loose waist, he could have been a round 2, round 3 character. I just don't know anything about him. So to me, I think that was a relatively easy one. Probably the easiest decision I've made in this entire tournament so far. Could be a finalist. I could be saying Ultimate Warrior and Jim Brunzell in the final 2. Why not? So, Jim Brunzell moves on to round 2. Next matchup was going to feature Razor Ramon and Terry Gordy. So, as we already know, there is a Scott Hall figure in the original AWA Remco line. Coming in the grudge match, Black Card Series 4, with Razor Ramon and Jimmy Garvin. Well, like I said, this is a big diamond stud Scott Hall action figure, and when I first decided to make this tournament, I felt like this could be my winner. I mean, this figure is just that good. And it's going against original Terry Gordy from the 3-pack of the Freebirds. And we'll give a look at a great likeness of Scott Hall, who I will probably most likely just call Razor Ramon throughout this entire tournament because that's how I remember him. I mean, absolute perfect head sculpt. And you see him in his AWA days. He did have this same wrestling outfit. So when you kind of look at him with the mustache and everything, to me, that's not Razor Ramon. So having a more updated version to me was really important. Terry Gordy would probably be an absolute elite figure. When it comes to loose figures, I don't have accessories for all of them, and so because this one doesn't have an accessory, it kind of ruins it for me. Now, this one isn't exactly in the best shape either, and I think I just bought this one. I only paid like $10 for it, probably 17 or so with shipping and taxes. But I just wanted another, individual, loose figure to add to go along with the carded figures, and I think with the added weight to the figure and everything kind of makes it a little bit more special than a lot of these figures that have these really chiseled, 20 packs. Not even a 6-pack, man. It's like a 20-pack. No way in heck is Razor Ramon losing this battle. Obviously, when Razor Ramon first came to WWF, he portrayed the Scarface character. Always, talking in kind of like a little Cuban accent with a little toothpick and everything. But the Razor's Edge, man, to me, was just one of my favorite things. Just kind of bring it over the head. We used to do that as kids constantly. Well, what sucks is, you're wrestling on the floor, so when you come down, you got to kind of drop to your knees and kind of slowly lower your brothers to the ground so that you're not bashing their head in or whatnot. I think my older brother did that to me one time, and the way I came down, instead of laying on my head, my head kind of turned, so I ended up kind of falling on the side of my face, and I think like this part of the face, hit the ground, and yeah, that was no fun. I don't know. Actually, we may have been outside when that happened. No, it was probably the living room. But even with a carpet, I mean, you fall face first onto the ground like that. That's painful. When you're probably 7, 8, 9 years old, Razor Ramon, European champion, multiple-time Intercontinental champion, definitely one of the greatest Intercontinental champions of all time. Legendary battles with friggin' Shawn Michaels. The latter match will live on in infamy. Terry Gordy, again, one of those characters. A lot of these AWA characters, originals, I'm not going to know a lot about. So, for nostalgia and for a look, yes, Razor Ramon is going to sweep the floor with Terry Gordy. Razor Ramon, such an easy selection to move on to round 2. Alright, the last matchup. Oh, okay, awesome. It's going to feature another Freebird, and that is Buddy Roberts, as he squares off against Macho Man Randy Savage. So we'll start with the Freebirds, and what I like to classify, or which has been classified as the Freebird rule, meaning that there's 3 members of a tag team. So it doesn't matter which 2 members win the tag team. Any one of the 3 members could, can basically compete against another incumbent or another contender. Why do I always slack on the words? Another contender for the belts. So if it was Jimmy Garvin and Buddy Roberts that won the titles, Buddy Roberts and Gordy could defend them. So I always love that rule, and I think that would fit perfectly with guys like Demolition, for example. I think later on Legion of Doom brought in a 3rd member, but again, that was probably after my time. I don't really remember that guy too well. I'm trying to think. Was Buddy Roberts referred to as Nature Boy, or was that like a Buddy Landell that I'm thinking of? It seems like there's so many different characters of that take on that name of Nature Boy. To me, when I think Nature Boy, it's all Ric Flair, all day, every day. But apparently, that's more like being called Baron or being called I don't know, Duke and Duchess. Like it's a title, not necessarily a name strictly for one person. With this particular accessory, with the overall look of the figure, one of the most absolute fantastic, perfect figures of the AWA original line. And he goes up against a really solid Macho Man figure. Is this the best of the 2? I do have 2 different Macho Mans in this tournament. I like the head sculpt a little bit better on the other one, but I think with the shirt accessory, it really ties this one in. And Macho Man, to me, he always kind of reminds me of Hulk Hogan in the sense that if you see them in the 80s, or if you see them in, the 2000s, they always seem to be like 40 years old from the get-go. Like Hulk Hogan at the age of 20-something or 30-something looked like he was like a 40 or 50-year-old man. I kind of felt the same way about Randy Savage. I mean, he couldn't have been, he kind of had to be in like his 30s in the 1987 era, 86 when he first joined WWF, 85. And, with balding in the top of his head, he just looked like he was in his 50s. And later on, when he pushed closer to his 60s, or would look like he was in his 60s, he just got more buff and more ripped. Kind of like your Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man from 2002 era. I'm not going to say any more about these because I think it's pretty obvious. Macho Man, era appropriate, a perfect addition to the roster, absolutely amazing. Hands down, of course, you're going to push Macho Man further into this tournament. Does he win it? I would like to see how I would just choose between this one and the other one. I like the, like I said before, I like the head sculpt on the other one better, but I think overall this is a better quality figure, so I think this one, throughout the course of this tournament, should do very well. Alright, so, to recap, Jim Duggan defeated Shark Boy, Ultimate Warrior defeated Baron Von Raschke, Jim Brunzell defeated Buff Bagwell, Razor Ramon defeated Terry Gordy, and Macho Man defeated Buddy Roberts. Alright, so at 24 minutes, and looks like that's going to be about the time frame for these videos, 25 to 30 minutes, which is fine. Once again, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I will end the video here and see you in the next video. Alright, goodbye, everyone.